So I thought I would do a kind of a book event, book tour, book festival survival guide. And I think this will apply to readers and writers, aspiring writers, although I don't like the term aspiring writers, you know. I think if you're writing, you're a writer. But yeah, I've got some good tips. I've done a lot of events, festivals, tours, bookshop things, and I want to just kind of share what I've learned in the hope that it's helpful. So these are some fairly random thoughts, anecdotes, pointers that might be useful. Number one, and I'm not paid for this. This is not sponsored video, but I am a huge fan when touring of Premier Inn. There you go, I said it. For years, I stayed almost exclusively in Premier Inns. If I was doing like 5 cities in 5 nights, Premier Inn. Why? Because they're really inexpensive. There's one like everywhere. They do good breakfasts. The beds are comfortable. I mean, what other reasons do you need, you know? I found them brilliant. I don't really stay in them anymore because Premier Inns are great. Love Premier Inns. Do Premier Inns. Premier Inns. The nice thing about them is if you're in Manchester one night and then you're in Durham the next night and then you're in Edinburgh the next night and then you're in York the next night and you're in Lincoln the next... Obviously this is UK focused. It feels like you're in the same hotel room. And sometimes it feels really discombobulating staying in a different city every night. So to be able to stay in this with the same color scheme, the same make of mattress, I find it very relaxing. So, and you can normally get a room for kind of £50. What's that, $70 or something? Probably what's the equivalent in the US? I don't know. Maybe somebody can tell me what the equivalent in your country is in the comments. But Premier Inn, $50-60 a night. Really good, like the touring author's friend, I would say. And then depending on your level in your career, where you've got to, or what your expenses can be, what you've agreed with your publicist, or what you're prepared to spend. Obviously, you know, stay in a nice hotel if you can, if you want to, or stay in somewhere even cheaper if you want to, like a hostel or something. But Premier Inn is a really good option. I'm a big fan. Checking out times. Often you'll find that authors are in the hotel, they are doing an event, doing a bookstore event or doing a festival, but then they'll go back for 2 hours in the afternoon and start working because they've got a deadline or they want to work through something. I've got a helicopter flying over the shack right now. I don't know if you can hear that. It's pretty much the only sign of civilization we ever get here is helicopters flying over, like search and rescue, that kind of thing. Yeah, checking. So if you're working in your hotel and checkouts at 10 or 11, what I do is I check out at 10 or 11 because I'm just very compliant and kind of scared of pissing someone off. But Sophie Hannah, fantastic author Sophie Hannah, has a tip. I think it's her, I'm pretty sure it's her tip, that I read a year ago or 2 years ago, saying stay in your room. Like if you're working, stay in your room, keep working until they kick you out, until somebody comes, and then you leave politely. But you might get an extra hour or 2 to be able to work in your room. It's a good tip. Like I say, I don't follow that, but I think it's a helpful tip if you've got a deadline. If you visit a bookshop, if you visit a brilliant indie bookshop, Forum Books in Corbridge, Goldsborough in London, No Alibis in Belfast, Imagine Things in Harrogate. If you visit a bookshop, these guys are working really hard and they're doing a brilliant thing. You know, they're helping readers find their next books. I think if you're going there dropping in, maybe to sign stock, maybe to meet readers, to do an event. Maybe you're there just to say hi and sign whatever book is on the shelf. It's good to bring a treat, a snack. I try and bring Swedish chocolate when I can. Something like that, just to keep those booksellers going, because they are vitally important, you know, to the community. And I think any little thing, little extra gift, is a nice gesture, and it can't do any harm, and they deserve it. Festivals. So when you start going to festivals, I've recently been to Cheltenham. I love Harrogate. Big fan of places like Edinburgh. I was at the Hong Kong Book Fair 2 years ago. Love Listowel Writers Week in Ireland. Love festivals in general, but they are intense. And if you are there as a reader or as a writer, why else would you be there? Then you are probably going to be fairly introverted, or maybe not, but I am. And most, I think, of my author friends tend to be. So you do your big event, you do your panel, or you mingle with your writer friends and meet readers. It can all get a bit much. Like, it's so much fun, it's lovely, but you might need a breather. And if you need a breather, go and have a breather. Go back to your hotel and have a nap. And this is something I've learned from festival veterans. It's not a bad thing, if you're exhausted on night 2, to go back to your room, have a pizza on your own, watching the frickin' Antiques Roadshow, you know, just recharge, have a shower, then go back out, obviously, to the festival and have a good time. But like, giving yourself breathers and breaks, nobody's gonna care, and you're gonna feel so much better, and you're gonna have a lot more energy long term. So I think breaks are really, really, really the key to success. And also pacing yourself before your event. So if you're at a festival and you have your big event on the Saturday night and you're going to be in front of a few hundred people, for me, I feel like I owe that audience a good time, like an interesting time or a funny time or both. So in the night or 2 leading up to that, when I'm at the festival, I'm going to pace myself just out of respect to the audience, to be honest. Just because I can't go on hungover and exhausted and pissed and perform really well. Some authors can. Hats off to them, but I know I cannot. So pace yourself before your main event. And when your main event comes on, when you're like prepping for it, just have a little think about how you can introduce your book, because that's probably going to be a question. Rehearse like a little reading that takes a minute or 2. Don't do a 10-minute reading ever. Nobody wants to hear your 10-minute reading. But like a short reading, it's good to practice it so you don't stumble, so that you can be almost audiobook quality. You know what I mean? I think you need to practice. I certainly need to practice to be able to do that. And then just before you go on, just give yourself a little pep talk and for me, I have a crisis of confidence every time. Like internally, I'm like, I can leave out of the back exit. I'll never have to do this. Always have that crisis. Nobody notices because it's a split second in my head, but I always think about doing a runner. And I never have, and I never will, but I always think about it. And then you get on stage and it's exciting and it's great fun. And authors are often a weird combination of hermit and a tiny piece of a show off in there. That's the mix. So you get a chance to be a show off for an hour, which is fun because it's safe. You know, you're talking to readers and you're talking about your own book, you're talking about other people's books. It's a nice place to be. When you're at an event like that, you're going to meet a lot of people. You're going to probably meet like a photographer that photographs the people on your panel. You'll meet sound engineers who hook you up with microphones. You'll meet all the organizers. Just be lovely to everyone. Why? Because they're doing a great thing. Obviously, they are putting on this festival. They're bringing readers and writers together. They are important, wonderful people. They're working really hard. Like, they're exhausted at this point. You've come in, you've swanning in to do your event, and they're trying to orchestrate this extremely complicated festival universe, you know, trying to get people in on time and manage all of these creative people and trying to get this thing to work so that the festival goers have a great time. That's bloody difficult work. So just be very kind and patient and nice to everyone, because you're probably going to, if you go back to that festival a year later or 3 years later, you'll meet those same people and they will remember if you've been an ass. So just be nice and be patient. If you're doing a tour, you'll either tour with your publicist, you'll go to various different events, like in a car, on a train or whatever, and your publicist will take you from place to place, and that's great because they can kind of make sure you hit everything on time. But if you're doing a part of it on your own, which is very, very much the norm, then schedule it so you have enough time between things, between nights, between events. If you're doing a radio interview in the middle of the day and then you're doing a bookshop event in the afternoon and then you're doing a live thing in the evening, just make sure you give yourself enough time for a break and a meal because you're going to need that stuff. Don't cram it all in, so if your train's half an hour late you end up disappointing 200 people. It's just going to stress you out and you're already going to be kind of tired and stressed. So yeah, for me, I give myself decent buffer zones, decent chunks of time in case something goes wrong, and God forbid you get a rail replacement bus service or something like that, because the last thing you want is to be stressing out on a bus trying to practice your reading before your event, looking at your watch. So just give yourself plenty of time. Costs. How costs can be split. So sometimes it's a self-published author doing this kind of thing. Sometimes it's someone who's published by a small indie and they finance it themselves, the different events. Sometimes you'll split the costs in some way with the event or with the publisher. Sometimes your publisher will cover everything. Sometimes you will cover everything. Whatever you're going to do, just make sure it's all transparent, pre-approved, pre-agreed. Talk about these things before they happen, and that will just remove any worries on any side. Normally events will pay an author, and sometimes they'll cover travel and accommodation as well. Just like, make sure you've got everything clear before you do it, so there are no there's no animosity or there's no disagreements. Advanced rail tickets. I mean, you know this already. You're all grown-ups, but it makes a huge difference. I find rail tickets are so expensive, and when I tour, I use a bunch of trains. So if you book them a decent amount in advance, you can get good seats or good tickets, whatever, for really, really good prices. Yeah. Going back to costs of everything, that obviously will depend also, if you're covering stuff yourself, on whether you are a company or whether you're a sole trader, how you manage all of those costs. Maybe I should do a whole other video on that. It's going to be pretty dry, but it's important stuff. And most authors have at least a year or two before they're published or leading into publication where everything is a little bit up in the air. Like maybe you're a sole trader and you want to become a company, something like that. So make sure you keep all your receipts, and again, everything is like organized. So when I'm traveling, touring, I keep all my receipts in one particular place. I photograph them. I try to have duplicates on email, just so when I get home it doesn't take me 2 days to deal with all the admin. And also, just know that everyone's nervous at an event. Like if you go to a festival and you're a reader, all the other readers are a bit nervous, especially if it's their first time. Most of the writers are a bit nervous, but you'll never meet a more lovely group of people than at a festival or an event. So you're nervous, so is everyone else. So just like go up to people, have a beer, have a chat. Everyone tends to be extremely friendly. That's my experience anyway of these kinds of festivals, just the nicest people. So totally understand if there's some trepidation there, and if you haven't been to a festival yet or a bookstore event, then consider it. Whether you kind of access it online or if you can go in person, I think they're just the loveliest things. They're great. They're really, really great. You get to talk books with people, and hang out. That's it. That's the video. I'll be back soon. Bye-bye.